Right. Starts.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So a couple of weeks ago I finally got the 944 running.
It's not stopping? It's not stopping. Yeah, that's not good.
Did you jump the DME with the...
That's why.
That's why.
A little bit of a flashback. Shit, dude, that sounds so good. Yes, sir.
I invited a friend, Spencer Sensusi, out to help me drag this project across the Spencer, if you don't know, was one of the first people to actually complete the 07K swap into a 944. He did it as a college student in a field with a box of scraps. He's also a legit mechanical engineer, and I can't think of another single person on the planet who's more qualified to help figure out this swap and to get it running. One of my recent videos was one on lessons learned in order to help the rest of the community complete their own swap if they're somebody like me who's not a mechanical engineer or mechanic by trade. And while we're working together, I learned more lessons and mistakes that I made along the way, and I wanted to pass those along to all of you. I'd also like to give a huge shout out to Boost Brothers Garage. In my last video I was a little critical on their lack of documentation as well as support around those of us who are trying to build something other than a race car, but I have to say they've really stepped their game up. Since my last video, they hired David from PE, who helped design the PE standalone ECU and harness, and he is incredibly knowledgeable. As you saw in the video for the start earlier, we had a problem where the car was not stopping when the key was turned off, and he really helped me figure that out. 8 o'clock at night his time, he ran a print off of the 944's electrical setup and then got on the phone with me to make sure everything was working on the ECU side, provided the right drivers, and was really helpful. So I have to give credit where credit is due. Bruce Brothers Garage is really stepping their game up, and just in time for the next batch of 07K swap kits to be developed and ordered. So if you're looking to get into this particular swap, now is the time to do it. I'm also going to be doing a series of videos around the routing and parts that I use to run oil, coolant, the electrical, and eventually the air conditioning. That's going to have a lot more specific detail around what it is I had to do to get everything routed and running. Look for those after I get the car running regularly and driving, because I want to make sure that I'm not providing bad advice if I had to go back and change something in order to optimize it. These lessons learned are going to be starting with the easiest and going to the hardest. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it.
All right. The first thing that I want to talk about is a really straightforward problem that I wasn't aware of or that I didn't notice. Again, probably just me, but as we crawl into the car here, you'll see that there is, in the upper oil pan, this black cap here. This is mostly for use by people who are doing turbocharger stuff, since I am saying in the naturally aspirated world, you need to cap this off. Completely didn't see that, completely missed it. That is an AN10 cap, really straightforward.
All right, one of the other issues we've had to contend with pretty heavily are coolant leaks. And this was self-inflicted. See, if you take a look at the clamps, and I can tell that they're leaking at pretty much all of the clamps. If we take a look here, you can see that these clamps have these flathead screwdriver heads. But what I didn't realize or didn't notice is that they are also hex heads. So whereas what I was doing was taking a screwdriver or maybe a drill with a screwdriver attachment, I was physically trying to tighten them down. What I didn't realize, and what is a better thing to do, is to actually take a socket wrench, put it over top of the clamp, and actually tighten it down. So this is probably something that's super obvious to a lot of people, but to me it was just something that I hadn't put together. So that was quite a lesson learned. That I wish I had figured out, or that I had realized before I had all of the coolant lines stuck up inside of the car, where it is now super difficult to get to. So that's my takeaway for you guys, is don't use a screwdriver, use a socket wrench to tighten down your coolant lines. It'll save you a lot of time and energy in the future. The day after we put the fluids into the car, we also discovered that we had a pretty significant amount of oil leaks coming out of the car, not just coolant leaks. A good way to solve this is to use the product called The Right Stuff. I used off-the-shelf RTV from Permatex. The Right Stuff just seems to be a lot more user-friendly and a lot more successful. It is more expensive, but it's worth the cost. An unfortunate update down here. So in addition to using the wrong stuff, I also installed and sealed the oil pan incorrectly. So you can see here that I have drained all of the oil out of the car. My mechanic Lee, my buddy, stopped by and took a look at my handiwork, and he essentially told me that the whole pan has to be completely resealed. So that is unfortunate. So unfortunately, I don't have great advice for you here, other than to say, in addition to using the right stuff, make sure that you seal the engine properly. This might be something that you could use a mechanic's help with, or somebody, you know, maybe to give you some guidance who's done better than me. So unfortunately, this means that instead of my triumphant first drive out of the garage, I'm gonna have it taken on a tow truck down to Lee's garage locally to have him and his professional team reseal this pan. So if you're not comfortable or not confident, maybe this is something that you should have a professional do. So, all right, on to the next one. When we went to install the fuel rail, and we finally got power to the pump, more on that at a later video, but we finally got that figured out. I will have more documentation on that, but during the initial start, we had a lot of problems getting fuel to the engine, which is why we used starter fluid in the intro. So once we did get fuel to it though, we uncovered a mistake that I had made. You know, I keep saying we, but it was definitely me, where you need these fuel injector O-rings. Now, this was actually on the Boost Brothers garage packing list, and I had these sitting around for quite some time, but I honestly didn't think that we needed them because I had taken the injectors out of the stock 07K fuel rail, and they looked like they were in acceptable condition. Now, in my case, I decided to use the integrated engineering fuel rail and not the stock one. And if you decide to do that, you're definitely going to need a set of these O-rings. I'll include a part number down below. So make sure you do that. We had injector leaks on all 5 of them, and fuel went everywhere. So don't be like me. Get the O-rings if you're using the integrated engineering fuel rail. All right, so the 2 components that have been the most difficult for me to figure out over the course of this build are power steering. So the next lesson learned is picking the right components. All right, so one of the things that was kind of frustrating about learning, about the right power steering components to buy is that it's kind of amazing to me on the market how many things exist that probably shouldn't exist for these platforms. Like, how can manufacturers get away with making things that aren't going to work? So in this case here, you can see that I have this big braided steel line coming off of my reservoir into my suction hose on the power steering pump. So unfortunately, this is a press fitting. And while I was getting this into position, unfortunately, this press seal fitting for the suction line popped right out. I'm having a hard time getting it out with the camera in the way, but you can see how much move that is giving. And I was really hoping that I could just pop that back on, and because it was a suction line with the right O-ring in place, it would be fine. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. So this is the basic 1.8T power steering pump that is available on Rock Auto. This may not be the most reliable setup because of these press fittings. They're just going to be prone to leaking. So rather than use the new model Rock Auto one, what I purchased instead is this. This is a power steering pump off of a Audi A4, and it's also from a Volkswagen Passat between 1997 and 2005. And rather than that press fitting, so take a look at that. It's a little black, so let me get a little bit more light on it. But as you can see, there we go, yep. All right, so it's got a bolt that's holding it into place. So the suction line won't come off. So this should be a lot less likely to leak. So this would be my advice, is to make sure that you buy maybe a used 1.8T or maybe a new stock one. But this looks really heavy, really robust, and I don't think I'll have a problem with it. The other thing you want to make sure too is that if you buy one of these, you get one with these removable heads here. I accidentally bought one without thinking, like this, and as you can see, this pulley doesn't come off, so this is completely useless to me. So, so now I have 3 power steering pulleys, most of which that I can't use. So that is my recommendation, is instead of going with a new press-fitting power steering pump, go with something older. Now, while on the topic of power steering components, let's talk about the cooler. All right, so this is my Durali power steering cooler. These are like 40, 50 bucks. You can get them just about anywhere. But if you take a look here, you can see that this, let me drag you in a little closer. You can see that this fitting is actually not sitting straight. If I go to tighten it down, you'll see that it just kind of pops straight off the end there. You can see it's actually bent. So this is the second of these that I purchased from the same brand, and it had the exact same thing happen with this AN6 fitting on the end. What this has actually done is it's mangled the fitting. So I have to replace not only the cooler, because it's now broken because of this little fitting here, but also this AN180 fitting for Dash 6 is gone too. Now, this is the third power steering cooler that I've gone through from this brand. This is another one that I bought, and it had the same problems with the AN6 fittings on top here. You can actually see that it was a little damaged. And then this is what it did to the fitting on the inside. There we go. You can see that it's completely mangled the threads inside of that AN fitting. So of course this isn't gonna work. It's gonna leak every single time. And you know, once I could understand being maybe user error or something like that, but twice with the same sort of setup, I got a slightly different form factor with the second one. It's just not a very good quality product if it's tearing your stuff apart. So I would strongly recommend steering clear of this brand. You also want to make sure that you have those AN6 fittings. I bought this was the first one that I got, and you can see here that it just is, you know, hose clamps all the way on top of it. Again, this goes back to me just being mystified that you can purchase things like this because there's so much pressure involved in the hydraulic system of a power steering rack that this probably wouldn't have worked either. So a complete waste of time and money. So what would I recommend? So obviously I haven't installed this yet, and I will have a complete video around the power steering stuff, but you know it's not leaking as far as my heat exchangers go right now? This. So I would purchase a Mishimoto oil cooler, and I'm going to replace and put those in. And this one in particular, the other oil cooler is an AN10s. That's AN6, so that's gonna hook up to my current system just fine. So this is a quality product. It's twice the price of the other two, but just don't waste your time, man. Just get the right thing the first time, and hopefully that will alleviate any problems down the road, so that way you don't have to keep dealing with cheap parts. All right, on to the next one. All right, the next thing that I learned while Spencer was here was how to install the intake. So this seems relatively straightforward, but this is really something that you're gonna have to familiarize yourself with as the owner of a 07K Swap 944. And the reason why is that almost any major maintenance or anything that you're gonna do is gonna require you to take this intake off. I mean, take a look right here at where your oil filter is, especially in my case, it's caged in there. So you're gonna have a real hard time getting to this and taking it off unless you take this intake off. So the best way to, there's a sort of science to this, and the best way to do it you're gonna need this, the 5mm Allen wrench with a swivel that came with the Boost Brothers garage kit, and then one of these things, this big, this little grabby tool here. This is gonna be very helpful for you to get this into place. To do it, all you do is you take these little plugs here, and line it up where the holes go. There you go. And then there's two of them on either side. Mine isn't working on the other side, so I'm just using 2 bolts to make it happen. Now I'm gonna show you the basic method for this one here, but it's gonna work for all of them because as you can see here, all of them are kind of hard to get to. Like they have to go thread through the fuel rail and through all these cables and stuff like that. And there's 2 of them on the end that are below our low there. So you really have to get used to finding these and knowing where they're at in order to connect them. So in order to make that connection, or to get those bolts in, you just put the screw on the end there, and then slide it into the hole. Maybe turn it to thread it a little bit. Leave it there, and then grab your big Allen key, and just tighten it all the way down. You want to, of course, tighten that with like an Allen wrench or something like that. Do keep in mind that these are, fragile aluminum pieces, so we don't want to hurt them too bad. Don't want to torque them down too bad, but just do keep that in mind. These 2 things together will save you a lot of time and energy when it comes to installing every single one of those bolts to get the intake in. So that is the method. All right, the next lesson learned is how to bleed the clutch. Turns out this is a pretty specific procedure you have to follow. When Spencer and I were doing it, we were so worried that we weren't actually getting the clutch to bleed that we were freaking out a little bit. We thought that maybe there was a leak, that I had installed the throwout bearing run properly or something like that, and that was why the clutch wasn't bleeding properly. The first thing you need to do is to elevate the car, so that way the front is over the back like that. The next thing you'll need is a motive power bleeder. You'll take it and connect it to the brake fluid reservoir. They share a reservoir, so they're both coming from the same place. And then you'll pump it up to about 15 psi. Then, and I cannot stress this enough, you will very slowly pump the clutch pedal. Not quick, very slowly. For this last one, this one is probably the hardest to learn, and it's not something that is super tangible, but you know what, for this one, I could actually use a change of scenery, couldn't you? Why don't we go somewhere else? Come with me. There we go. This scenery is a lot better for talking about things that are a little bit more stressful. This last one is as much for me as it is for the rest of you, and that is, it's okay to make mistakes. Don't be so hard on yourself. I know that the whole time Spencer was here, it was one humbling lesson after another about all of the mistakes that I'd made over the years of working on this project, even with him consulting from a distance. It was humbling. And even though I had spent so much time and effort and energy learning new things like welding, more about how electronics work, how to seal things, or at least I thought I did, it was still really difficult to accept how many mistakes I'd made along the way. I'd really hoped to have this car running and driving for the summer, and I got halfway there, which I guess is all right, but I can do better. It's been difficult to accept these failures. When Lee came over, my mechanic buddy, to look at the work that had been done, he inspected the leaks to the oil pan and he said it was going to have to be completely redone. I hit a breaking point, man. It's not the first time in this project that I felt real bad or wanted to give up, but this was one of those times where it was just like something I did a year ago is going to make it so that way the whole project has to start from ground zero. And I felt terrible. I could not eat, I could not sleep, I was anxious, I was sweaty, and it was just a miserable, miserable time. Eventually though, I came to the realization that the only person who is putting all of this stress on myself is me. And if you're like me, you might be similar. You might have high levels of perfectionism that requires you to execute perfectly the first time, but give yourself a little grace. If we were professional mechanics or engineers, we would be doing this day in, day out, and we would have all the confidence in the world to know that we were doing things correctly. But even those guys make mistakes. So, of course I biffed sealing the oil pan. Of course I didn't tighten things down as much as I should have, because I had never done it before. It's the first time, and this is probably going to be your first time too. And if it is, just learn to forgive yourself for the mistakes that you make. There is nothing that is done here that cannot be undone and then redone properly the next time. So learn to treat yourself a little kindly. And that brings me to the last thing that I'm going to talk about in today's video. All of the work that I put into this car over the course of the last 6 months in preparing for Spencer's arrival has been a lot of stress. It has been hard to get everything all ready to go. And now I can't stand to look at the vehicle. I can't stand to look at the project. I'm tired, I'm burnt out, and I'm going to take a little break. The weather is beautiful out here this time of year. The Supra is running nicely, and I'm just going to spend time with my family, recharge my batteries, and then attack this again in the fall when the weather turns a little nasty. Anyway, in the meantime, if there is something that's come up that you have questions about or you'd like my take on, don't hesitate to reach out to me in the comments below, or you can reach me on Facebook. I want to make sure we all get these projects across the finish line as best as we're able, and hopefully these videos have been helpful for you. I'm pulling for you. We're all in this together. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.